Hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast Hey English. Episode number 2. My name is Philip.
And I'm Sara. We're so excited to have you join us today.
Today's episode is all about travel and transportation. We're going to dive into some great stories, share helpful tips, and explore the fascinating world of travel.
Absolutely. And while we're chatting, we'll also be teaching some useful English vocabulary, grammar, idioms, and phrases to help you improve your language skills.
That's right. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just dreaming of your next trip, we've got something for everyone. Plus, we'll make sure to keep it fun and informative.
So, grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and relax. We're about to embark on a journey together.
We'll start by sharing some of our personal travel experiences, and then we'll move on to different modes of transportation, planning and preparation tips, and even some cultural insights.
And don't worry, we've also got segments on navigating airports and stations, what it's like on the road or in the air, and arriving at your destination.
We promise it's going to be a fun ride. So, let's get started. Sara, why don't you kick things off with a story about one of your recent trips?
Oh, absolutely. I just got back from a trip to Italy. It was amazing. I spent a week in Rome, and it was such an unforgettable experience.
That sounds incredible. What did you do there?
Well, I visited all the iconic sites, the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Trevi Fountain. The architecture and history are just breathtaking. I also indulged in some delicious Italian cuisine. Pasta, pizza, gelato, you name it.
Yum! That sounds delicious. So, let's talk about some of the vocabulary related to travel. You mentioned itinerary earlier. What does that mean?
Great question. An itinerary is a plan or schedule of your trip, detailing where you will go and what you will do each day. For example, my itinerary included visiting the Colosseum on the first day, the Vatican on the second, and so on.
Got it. And what about accommodation? What does that refer to?
Accommodation is where you stay during your trip, like a hotel, hostel, or Airbnb. In Rome, I stayed in a charming little hotel near the city center. It was perfect for exploring the city.
Sounds lovely. Let's also touch on some grammar. You used the past simple tense to talk about your trip, like I visited the Colosseum. Can you give another example?
Sure. I could say, I tried authentic Italian gelato. It's a simple past action that happened during my trip.
And how about the past continuous tense? When do we use that?
We use the past continuous to talk about actions that were in progress at a specific time in the past. For example, I was exploring the Vatican when it started to rain.
Perfect. Those are great examples. Now, let's move on to some idioms and phrases. You mentioned you hit the road to Rome. What does that mean?
Hit the road is an idiom that means to begin a journey. So, when I say I hit the road to Rome, I mean I started my journey to Rome.
That's a fun phrase. Another one is travel light. Can you explain that?
Of course. Travel light means to bring only a small amount of luggage. For example, I decided to travel light and only brought a carry-on bag.
That's a useful tip. Thanks for sharing your story, Sara. Now, I'll share a memorable travel experience of my own.
I can't wait to hear it, Philip. Go ahead.
So, last year I went backpacking in South America. It was an incredible adventure. I traveled through Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, and I even hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing journey. What was the highlight of your trip?
Definitely reaching Machu Picchu after a 4-day hike. The view was absolutely breathtaking. I felt like I was on top of the world.
I can imagine. So, let's discuss some related vocabulary. You mentioned backpacking. What does that involve?
Backpacking is a form of low-cost, independent travel where you carry everything you need in a backpack. It's perfect for adventurous trips like hiking or exploring remote areas.
And what about layover? What does that mean?
A layover is a stop at an airport between connecting flights. For example, I had a layover in Lima before heading to Cusco to start my hike.
Got it. Those are great words to know. Now, let's cover some idioms. You mentioned you were on top of the world. What does that mean?
On top of the world is an idiom that means feeling extremely happy and elated. Reaching Machu Picchu gave me that feeling.
That's wonderful. And another useful phrase is off the beaten path. Can you explain that?
Sure. Off the beaten path refers to places that are not well known or frequently visited by tourists. For example, some of the trails I hiked in Bolivia were definitely off the beaten path.
Those are some fantastic stories and tips, Philip. Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure, Sarah. And thank you for sharing your experiences too. Traveling really does open up a world of new experiences and learning opportunities.
It sure does. And we hope our listeners feel inspired to explore and learn more about the world and the English language along the way.
Now that we've shared some of our travel stories, let's move on to our next segment, at the airport or station. Navigating these places can be quite an adventure on its own.
Absolutely, Philip. Airports and stations can be overwhelming, especially if it's your first time or if you're in a foreign country. But don't worry, we're here to help make it a bit easier.
That's right. Let's start with the basics. When you first arrive at the airport or train station, the first thing you usually do is check in. Sarah, can you explain what that involves?
Sure. Checking in is the process where you confirm your presence for your flight or train ride. You can do this at a check-in counter, a self-service kiosk, or even online before you get to the airport. You'll get your boarding pass, which is your ticket to board the plane or train.
Great! And along with your boarding pass, you might have to check in your luggage if it's too large to carry on. The checked luggage goes into the cargo hold of the plane or the baggage compartment of the train.
Exactly. And once you've checked in, the next step is usually going through security. This is where you and your carry-on items are screened to ensure safety. You'll have to pass through a metal detector, and your bags will go through an X-ray machine.
It can be a bit nerve-wracking, but it's pretty straightforward. Just remember to follow the rules, like removing your laptop from your bag and taking off your shoes if required.
Right. And once you're through security, you need to find your gate or platform. Your boarding pass will have this information. Gates and platforms are usually clearly marked, but don't hesitate to ask for directions if you're unsure.
Speaking of asking for directions, let's talk about some useful vocabulary. Gate is a term used in airports for the area where you board the plane. In train stations, it's called a platform.
And then there's the terminal, which is the building where passengers go to board or get off airplanes. Train stations don't usually use this term, but it's good to know for airports.
Another important term is boarding pass. This is the document you receive at check-in that allows you to board the plane or train. It has all your essential travel details.
Let's also cover some common issues you might encounter. For example, flight delays. Philip, have you ever had a flight delay? How did you handle it?
Oh, definitely. Delays are quite common. When it happens, I always check the departure boards for updates and listen for announcements. It's also a good idea to have the airline's app on your phone for real-time updates.
That's smart. And if your luggage gets lost, the first step is to report it to the airline's lost and found or baggage claim desk. They usually have forms for you to fill out and can help track your bag.
Exactly. Most airlines are pretty efficient at locating and returning lost luggage. And now, let's cover a few useful idioms. For instance, red tape. Sarah, can you explain this one?
Sure. Red tape refers to excessive bureaucracy or formalities that can slow down processes, like checking in or dealing with delays. For example, we missed our flight due to all the red tape at the security checkpoint.
Another one is smooth sailing. It means that everything is going well without any problems. For example, after we got through security, it was smooth sailing to our gate.
And then there's up in the air, which means something is uncertain or undecided. For example, our flight schedule is still up in the air due to the weather.
Great examples, Sarah. So, to sum up, navigating airports and stations can be a lot smoother if you know what to expect and have the right vocabulary.
Absolutely. And remember, if you're ever unsure about something, don't hesitate to ask airport or station staff for help. They're usually very knowledgeable and willing to assist.
That's excellent advice. We hope these tips make your next airport or station experience a bit easier. Next, we're going to talk about what it's like to be on the road or in the air. Traveling can be an adventure in itself, and we've got plenty of tips and stories to share.
Absolutely, Philip. Let's start with road travel. There's something special about hitting the open road, right? Have you taken any memorable road trips recently?
Yes, I have. Last summer, I took a road trip along the Pacific Coast Highway in California. The views were absolutely stunning: beaches, cliffs, and the ocean on one side, and mountains on the other.
That sounds incredible. Road trips are such a great way to see the country. Let's talk about some useful vocabulary for road travel. For example, rest stop. What is that, Philip?
A rest stop is a designated area along a highway where drivers can park their cars, use restrooms, and sometimes grab a snack. They're great for taking a break during long drives.
Exactly. And another important term is scenic route. This refers to a road that offers beautiful views and is often a bit longer than the main highways. For example, we decided to take the scenic route to enjoy the coastline.
Perfect. Now, let's cover some grammar. When giving directions, we often use the imperative form. For example, turn left at the next intersection, or keep straight for 2 miles.
Right. Imperatives are commands or instructions. They're very useful when navigating new places. And now, let's switch gears and talk about air travel. Philip, what tips do you have for flying comfortably?
One key tip is to stay hydrated. The air inside the plane can be very dry, so it's important to drink plenty of water. Another tip is to move around occasionally to keep your circulation going, especially on long flights.
Great advice. And let's talk about some common vocabulary related to flying. For instance, turbulence. What is that?
Turbulence is the bumpy or shaky movement of the plane caused by changes in the air. It can be a bit unsettling, but it's completely normal.
Another term is in-flight entertainment. This refers to the movies, TV shows, music, and other entertainment options provided during the flight to keep passengers entertained.
Exactly. And for those who prefer window seats or aisle seats, it's always good to specify your preference when booking your ticket. Personally, I prefer the window seat for the views.
Me too. Now, let's cover some idioms and phrases. Fasten your seatbelt is one you'll hear often. It means to buckle up for safety, and it's used both literally and figuratively. For example, fasten your seatbelt, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Another useful phrase is take off. This refers to the moment when the plane leaves the ground and starts flying. It can also mean to start something new. For example, our new project is about to take off.
And then there's jet lag, which refers to the feeling of tiredness after a long flight across different time zones. For example, I felt jet lagged after my flight from New York to Tokyo.
Those are all great phrases to know. So, whether you're on the road enjoying a scenic drive or flying high in the sky, having the right vocabulary and tips can make your journey much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And remember, every trip is an opportunity to learn something new and have a great experience. We hope these tips help you on your next adventure.
Now that we've covered being on the road and in the air, let's talk about that exciting moment when you finally arrive at your destination.
There's nothing quite like the thrill of stepping into a new place, is there? So, Philip, what's the first thing you do when you arrive at a new destination?
The first thing I usually do is go through customs and immigration if I'm traveling internationally. It's where officials check your passport and sometimes ask a few questions about your trip. It can be a bit daunting, but it's all part of the process.
Absolutely. And once you're through customs, it's time to pick up your luggage. This is done at the baggage claim area, where you wait for your bags to come out on a conveyor belt.
Right. And it's always a good idea to double-check that you have all your belongings before leaving the airport. Let's talk about some useful vocabulary related to arriving at your destination. For instance, customs. What exactly does that entail, Sarah?
Customs is the checkpoint where you declare any items you're bringing into the country and answer any questions the officials might have. It's important to be honest and straightforward. For example, I went through customs without any issues.
Another important term is immigration, which is the process of verifying your identity and the purpose of your visit to the country. It's usually straightforward if you have all your documents ready.
Exactly. And then there's local time. It's important to adjust your watch or phone to the local time as soon as you arrive. This helps you avoid confusion, especially if you're dealing with jet lag.
Speaking of jet lag, let's touch on that. It's the feeling of tiredness and confusion after traveling across multiple time zones. To combat jet lag, try to stay awake until the local bedtime and get some sunlight to help reset your body clock.
Great tips. Now, let's move on to some grammar. When you've just arrived somewhere, you often use the present perfect tense to talk about your experience. For example, I have just arrived in Paris, or we have already checked into our hotel.
Exactly. The present perfect is great for recent events that are relevant to the present moment. Let's also cover some useful idioms and phrases. One common phrase is find your bearings. Sarah, can you explain that?
Sure. Find your bearings means to become familiar with your new surroundings. For example, I need a few minutes to find my bearings after arriving in a new city.
Another good one is home away from home. This phrase describes a place where you feel as comfortable as you do at home. For example, our Airbnb felt like a home away from home.
And let's not forget living out of a suitcase, which means staying in different places for short periods and not unpacking your suitcase. For example, I've been living out of a suitcase during this business trip.
Those are all really useful phrases. And once you've found your bearings and settled in, it's time to explore. One of the first things I do is find out about local public transport. It's a great way to get around and see the sights.
Absolutely. Knowing how to use the local transport system can save you a lot of time and money. And it's a great way to immerse yourself in the local culture. Plus, it's often the most convenient way to get to your accommodation from the airport or station.
Speaking of accommodation, it's always a good idea to check in as soon as you can. This gives you a chance to drop off your luggage and freshen up before heading out to explore.
Definitely. And don't forget to ask the hotel or host for recommendations on places to visit, eat, and shop. Locals always know the best spots.
Great point, Sarah. Arriving at your destination is just the beginning of your adventure. With a little preparation and a sense of curiosity, you can make the most of your time in a new place.
Absolutely. We hope these tips help you feel more confident and excited about your travels. Next up, we'll talk about different transportation methods and how to choose the best one for your journey. Each mode of transport has its own pros and cons, and it's important to choose the one that best fits your needs and budget. Let's start with one of the most common methods, public transportation.
Public transportation is a great option for getting around cities. Buses, trams, and subways are often the most cost-effective way to travel. Plus, they give you a real feel for the local culture.
Definitely. And many cities have apps or websites where you can check schedules and plan your route. Just make sure to keep an eye on your belongings and stay aware of your surroundings.
Great advice. Another popular option is renting a car, especially if you're planning to explore areas that are off the beaten path. Renting a car gives you the freedom to travel at your own pace and make spontaneous stops along the way.
Right. But there are a few things to keep in mind. Make sure you're familiar with the local driving laws and have all the necessary documents, like an international driving permit if required. And always check the rental agreement for any additional fees or insurance requirements.
Exactly. And if you prefer a more eco-friendly option, consider renting a bicycle or using bike-sharing services. It's a great way to explore a city and stay active at the same time.
Biking is fantastic, especially in bike-friendly cities. Just make sure to follow the local traffic rules and wear a helmet for safety.
Now, let's talk about another convenient option, ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft. These can be a lifesaver when you need a quick and easy way to get around, especially in areas where public transportation is limited.
Absolutely. Ride-sharing is convenient and often more affordable than traditional taxis. Plus, the apps make it easy to see the estimated fare and track your driver's location.
That's true. And for longer distances, consider taking a train or a bus. Trains are a comfortable and scenic way to travel, especially in regions like Europe or Japan where the rail networks are extensive and efficient.
Yes, trains can be very relaxing and allow you to see the countryside. Just be sure to book your tickets in advance, especially for high-speed or long-distance routes. Buses, on the other hand, are usually more budget-friendly and can be a good option for traveling between cities.
Definitely. And for those looking for a bit of luxury or a unique experience, there are options like cruises or even hiring a private driver. These can add a special touch to your travel experience.
Exactly. Cruises are like floating hotels with a variety of amenities, and they're a great way to visit multiple destinations without the hassle of constantly packing and unpacking. Hiring a private driver can be more expensive, but it offers a personalized and stress-free way to explore.
Let's not forget about walking. Sometimes the best way to explore a new place is on foot. You get to see so much more and really immerse yourself in the local atmosphere.
Walking is wonderful, especially in areas with lots of history or natural beauty. Just make sure to wear comfortable shoes and carry a map or have a navigation app on your phone.
Great tips, Sarah. Now, let's go over some useful vocabulary related to transportation. For instance, fare. What does that mean?
The fare is the price you pay for a ride on public transportation, like a bus or train. For example, the bus fare to downtown is $2.50.
Another important term is itinerary. This is a planned route or journey. For example, our travel itinerary includes stops in Paris, Rome, and Barcelona.
And let's cover some idioms and phrases. One common phrase is hit the road, which means to start a journey. For example, we decided to hit the road early to avoid traffic.
Another useful phrase is catch a ride. This means to get a lift from someone or to use a ride-sharing service. For example, we caught a ride with our friends to the concert.
And then there's jump on the bandwagon, which means to join a popular trend. For example, many people are jumping on the bandwagon of using electric scooters in the city.
Those are all great phrases to know. Choosing the right mode of transportation can make a big difference in your travel experience. We hope these tips help you navigate your next trip with ease.
Absolutely. Whether you're exploring by foot, bike, car, or plane, the key is to enjoy the journey as much as the destination.
Next, we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects of any trip: travel planning and preparation. A well-planned trip can make all the difference.
That's right, Philip. Planning ahead not only helps you make the most of your time but also reduces stress and makes your travel experience much smoother. So, where do we start?
Let's start with research. Before any trip, it's crucial to research your destination. Look up the best times to visit, local customs, must-see attractions, and important travel advisories. This will help you set realistic expectations and avoid surprises.
Absolutely. It's also helpful to read travel blogs, watch vlogs, or join travel forums to get insider tips from other travelers. And don't forget to check the weather forecast for your destination to pack appropriately.
Speaking of packing, let's talk about creating a packing list. Start by listing essential items like travel documents, medications, and personal hygiene products. Then, think about clothing, consider the weather and activities you'll be doing.
Right. A good tip is to pack versatile clothing that you can mix and match, and always include a few extra items like a light jacket or a pair of comfortable shoes. Don't forget travel-sized toiletries if you're flying, and remember to follow the airline's liquid restrictions.
Great advice, Sarah. Another important aspect of travel planning is booking your accommodations and transportation in advance. This not only helps you secure better deals but also gives you peace of mind knowing that everything is sorted.
Definitely. And when booking accommodations, read reviews and check the location to make sure it's convenient for your plans. It's also a good idea to have a backup plan in case your first choice falls through.
Let's also talk about creating an itinerary. While it's important to leave room for spontaneity, having a rough plan of what you want to do each day can help you make the most of your trip. Include must-see attractions but also some downtime to relax and explore.
Exactly. And be sure to check the opening hours and any ticket requirements for the attractions you want to visit. This can save you a lot of time and hassle.
Now, let's cover some travel preparation tips. First, make copies of important documents like your passport, visa, travel insurance, and itinerary. Keep one set of copies with you and leave another set with someone you trust back home.
That's a great tip. Also, inform your bank about your travel plans to avoid any issues with your credit or debit cards while abroad. And consider getting a travel credit card that offers benefits like no foreign transaction fees or travel rewards.
Yes, and don't forget to check your phone plan. Some mobile carriers offer affordable international plans, or you can buy a local SIM card at your destination. Staying connected is important for navigation and staying in touch with loved ones.
Another important step is to learn a few basic phrases in the local language. Even simple greetings or questions can go a long way in making a positive impression and getting the help you need.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about some useful vocabulary related to travel planning. For example, itinerary. An itinerary is a planned schedule of your travel activities. For example, our itinerary includes visiting the Eiffel Tower and a Seine River cruise.
Another important term is confirmation number. This is the number you receive when you book something, like a flight or a hotel room. For example, keep your confirmation number handy when you check in.
Let's also cover some idioms and phrases. One common phrase is hit the ground running, which means to start something and proceed at a fast pace. For example, we hit the ground running as soon as we landed in Tokyo.
Another useful phrase is travel light, which means to pack minimally. For example, I prefer to travel light and only bring a carry-on suitcase.
And let's not forget off the beaten path, which means exploring areas that are not typical tourist destinations. For example, we found a great little cafe off the beaten path.
Those are all great phrases to know. Planning and preparation are key to a successful trip, but remember to stay flexible and enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. We hope these tips help you plan your next adventure with confidence and ease. Next, we're going to dive into one of the most enriching aspects of travel: cultural experiences and language tips. Exploring new cultures and learning new languages can truly enhance your travel experience.
That's right, Philip. Immersing yourself in the local culture not only makes your trip more memorable but also helps you connect with the people you meet along the way. Let's start by sharing some of our own cultural experiences.
Sure. One of my favorite cultural experiences was attending a traditional tea ceremony in Japan. It was fascinating to see the precision and care that goes into preparing and serving tea. It gave me a deeper appreciation for Japanese culture and their attention to detail.
That sounds amazing. I had a similar experience in Morocco when I visited a local souk, or market. The vibrant colors, the sounds of people bargaining, and the incredible aromas of spices were unforgettable. It was a sensory overload in the best possible way.
Those are the kinds of experiences that stay with you forever. Now, let's talk about some useful vocabulary and phrases for navigating cultural experiences. For instance, custom. What does that mean, Sarah?
A custom is a traditional practice or usual way of doing something within a particular society or culture. For example, it's a custom in many Asian countries to remove your shoes before entering someone's home.
Exactly. Another important term is etiquette. This refers to the rules of polite behavior in society or among members of a particular group. For example, understanding dining etiquette is important when visiting different countries.
Right. And now, let's cover some basic language tips. Learning a few key phrases in the local language can go a long way. For instance, knowing how to say please and thank you is always appreciated. In French, please is s'il vous plaît and thank you is merci.
Yes, and in Spanish, please is por favor and thank you is gracias. Even if you only learn a few words, it shows respect and a willingness to engage with the local culture.
Absolutely. Another useful phrase is excuse me. In Italian, you would say scusi. It's helpful for getting someone's attention politely or when you need to ask for directions.
Great point, Sarah. Now, let's talk about some common cultural practices. For instance, in many countries, it's customary to greet people with a kiss on the cheek. In France, it's known as la bise, and it's a common way to greet friends and family.
Yes, and in Japan, bowing is a traditional way of greeting. The depth and duration of the bow can vary depending on the situation and the relationship between the people involved. It's a sign of respect and politeness.
Those are excellent examples. Let's also cover some idioms and phrases related to cultural experiences. One common phrase is when in Rome, do as the Romans do. This means that you should adapt to the customs and behaviors of the place you are visiting. For example, when in Rome, do as the Romans do and try the local cuisine.
Another useful idiom is lost in translation. This refers to when the meaning of something is not accurately conveyed because of language differences. For example, some of the humor in the movie was lost in translation.
And let's not forget cultural shock, which is the feeling of confusion or discomfort that can occur when someone is suddenly exposed to a different culture or way of life. For example, I experienced a bit of cultural shock when I first moved to a new country.
Those are all great phrases to know. Embracing cultural differences and being open to new experiences is what makes travel so rewarding. Remember to be respectful and curious, and you'll have a much richer experience.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Trying new foods, participating in local traditions, and learning about different ways of life can be incredibly rewarding. And that wraps up today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed our deep dive into travel and transportation, and found our tips and insights helpful.
Absolutely. From personal travel experiences to navigating airports and exploring different transportation methods, we've covered a lot of ground. And don't forget our final segment on cultural experiences and language tips.
We shared our favorite travel tips and stories, but we'd love to hear from you, too. What are some of your travel experiences or tips? Drop them in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going.
And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. We've got more exciting content coming your way.
We want to thank you all for joining us today. Your support means the world to us. We hope you're inspired to start planning your next adventure with confidence and enthusiasm.
Safe travels, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and enjoy every moment of your journey.
See you next time.
Bye for now.